Welcome to the 5 on 5. We are pleased to be joined today by Governor Kate Brown. Governor Brown, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Just delighted to be back in Medford. Yes.
Yes, and the weather cooperated for you.
It's gorgeous today. Absolutely gorgeous.
So today you issued an executive order creating the Oregon Wildfire Response Council. What does that look like?
So it looks like a group of people coming together, folks from the timber industry, our federal partners, folks at the state level, to figure out how we change our firefighting patterns that we have used for the last over 100 years. The fires that we are having now are much more ferocious, they're fierce, and they're obviously more frequent than what we saw even 20 years ago. So how we fight fire has to change, and frankly, the work we're doing around prevention needs to change as well. The Rogue Valley was inundated with smoke for over 6 weeks this summer. Absolutely devastating to the economy, to people's health, and of course to recreational opportunities in the valley. We have to figure out how we prevent that type of scale of fire and the impacts in communities like the Rogue Valley.
And so is that putting a lot of heads all together and then action? Because a lot of people would say, what does a council do to mitigate the smoke, the lost business?
I'm expecting the report in September of 2019. In the meantime, I'll be working with the Department of Forestry, our federal partners, to make sure that we have more resources to aggressively attack the prevention, the thinning and the maintenance that needs to happen on our forests, as well as a higher level of prescriptive burning.
Okay. Federal workers are back on the job after the partial government shutdown. Was there anything that surprised you as far as the impacts that the state saw? It
was devastating, honestly, for families across the state. I was up in Seaside last week, and the community in Seaside as well as Astoria were both raising money and doing a food drive for the Coast Guard. They continued to work. They continued to work to save lives, and they were doing it without pay. And so I just was so incredibly proud of the efforts that communities across the state were doing to support our families. I also want to say thank you to the volunteers, to state employees, to federal workers, and of course my husband, who stepped up to fill the void, from cleaning restrooms, putting in toilet paper, to making sure that Oregonians could access recreational opportunities during the shutdown. We learned that federal employees that are working don't have access to unemployment benefits, so we're going to change that law. We can't count on the federal government. We need to make sure that the state steps up and helps our families.
And so is that one of the plans if we end up in this position in a few weeks?
The legislation is moving now, and as soon as it gets to my desk, I will sign it. I want to make sure that federal workers that are continuing to work can receive unemployment.
All right, Governor Brown, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. We are pleased to be joined once again by Governor Kate Brown. Governor Brown, thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk a little bit about the LNG pipeline. You've remained neutral on the project, but obviously your Southern Oregon constituents are divided on whether it's a good thing, a bad thing. Are you ready to take a position? And if not, would you be willing to say what your biggest concern is, as well as what you think the biggest benefit would be for the region?
So from my perspective, I think it's critically important that the governor in these instances make sure that Oregon statutes are followed, that regulations are enforced, and that Oregonians on all sides of the issues have an opportunity to have their voices be heard, that there's a fair process, and it's my duty and obligation as governor to ensure a fair process, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. In terms of concerns and opportunities with the pipeline, I think obviously from my perspective, one of the positives is the opportunity for job creations on the South Coast. Looks like it will create several hundred jobs. That's critically important for our rural communities. In terms of concerns, obviously the environmental impacts and the increase in carbon emissions.
Talking about funding with the supermajority in the legislature, do you see this as an opportunity to pass legislation to raise enough money to pay for Oregon services?
Well, I think there's a couple of things we're focused on right now. Number one, making sure that we have alignment with the legislature, teachers, parents, the business community on where do we need to make key investments in our schools. I'm absolutely committed to making sure that more of our children, particularly in hard-working families across the state, have access to pre-K. We want our kids to show up to kindergarten ready to learn. We want to reduce class sizes in kindergarten through 3rd grade and increase the school year. High school students don't like to hear about it. I want to make sure that every single high school student has access to career and technical ed, hands-on learning. And so we're working on making sure that we have alignment about where we need to make investments to improve outcomes for all of our kids. We want to make sure that every single student graduates from high school with a plan for their future and the tools to compete in a global economy. The second thing I'm doing, and I'm working with superintendents, with the legislature, is how can we ensure accountability? How can we ensure that every single taxpayer dollar is well spent in our school systems? We're meeting with superintendents, Superintendent Colt Gill, and of course the legislators to make sure that Oregonians can trust that their dollars are being well spent in our classrooms.
And I know you've said that you have lofty goals. Do we have the money to do some of those things, or where's it going to come from?
Don't know at this point. We're going to work, we're going to take a collaborative approach and figure out how we can make these investments that we need to make to ensure that Oregon is prepared for the future. I'm committed to making sure that we don't put more burdens on already struggling, hardworking families, and the economy is growing. In Oregon, we want to make sure that our businesses can continue to grow and thrive.
Governor Brown, thanks so much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Great to see you.
You as well. We'll be right back.